There are times when a man decides to stop texting her, sometimes because he's tired, sometimes because he feels distant, sometimes because he wants to understand how she reacts, sometimes because he's confused, sometimes because he wants to regain control, other times because he simply doesn't know what to say. And in that interval, in that void that creates between one message and the next, a thought that many men underestimate arises. What does she think when you stop texting her? What's going on inside her? What's going on inside her when your presence, which until yesterday was constant, is now absent? Men always imagine the worst response. They think she doesn't notice. They think she doesn't care. They think she already has someone else. They think she interprets the silence as disinterest and moves on as if nothing happened. But the truth is very different, because when a man stops texting, a woman doesn't remain indifferent. She doesn't remain still. She doesn't remain neutral. A woman immediately senses the change in pace. She senses the emptiness. She senses the silence. And she interprets it. Always. Because a woman lives in connection with what the other transmits. And when that transmission is interrupted, something inside her starts moving. The first thought a woman has when you stop texting her isn't about you. It's about herself. She doesn't immediately think, he's not interested in me anymore. She thinks, what's changed inside me? Women look inside before looking outside. They analyze their attitude, their tone, their last message. They ask themselves if they said something wrong, if they gave too much, if they were too available, or too cold. It's a natural mechanism. A woman questions her own value before questioning your behavior. And in this, sometimes she suffers more than you can imagine. Then comes the second thought. More silent, more subtle, but more important. She thinks, does he have other priorities? Because what attracts a woman isn't a man who always responds. It's a man who has a life. A man who isn't defined by the rhythm of his messages. A man who doesn't live glued to the screen. Women don't want a man who's always available. They want a man who stays true to himself even when he's not in touch with them. And when you stop texting her, if she's attracted, she feels your independence as something magnetic, because it reminds her of that characteristic every woman finds irresistible. A man who doesn't revolve around female approval, but around his own direction. That's when your absence begins to weigh heavily, not as a lack, but as a presence. Because a man becomes more present when his presence isn't constant. The absence of a stable man is different from the absence of a fragile man. The absence of a fragile man communicates weakness, capriciousness, instability. The absence of a stable man communicates value. It communicates direction. It communicates mastery. It communicates that your life has a specific weight and that you're not willing to sacrifice it to maintain a constant flow of messages. Many men think a woman immediately starts to lose interest when he stops texting, but it doesn't work that way. A woman loses interest when a man becomes predictable, when he becomes too available, when he becomes anxious, when he becomes clingy, when he loses himself chasing her, when he has no life, when he has no rhythm, when he lives for contact, not when he takes space. Space, if it comes from calm, direction, integrity, has a powerful effect on female attraction, because space creates mystery. It creates questions. It creates inner movement. It creates desire. And desire doesn't come from constant presence. It comes from alternation. It comes from rhythm. It comes from the fact that she feels something and then feels a void, and then wonders why. The perception of value doesn't come when you're there. It comes when you're not. It comes from the way she experiences your absence, and that's where your importance in her life is measured. Then there's another thought a woman has when you stop texting her. Why isn't he looking for me? She doesn't say it. She doesn't admit it. She doesn't show it. But she feels it. And faced with that question, a woman divides into two internal categories. The first is the woman who begins to feel insecure. She wants to know why you're not writing. She feels her ego is being touched. She thinks maybe she did something wrong. She thinks it wasn't interesting enough. And this insecurity, if you're a stable man, is a positive sign. because it means she cares, that she senses you, that your absence resonates with her. The second category is the woman who instead begins to admire you. She thinks, "This man doesn't live for me." And it's precisely at that moment that her attraction increases. Because women are attracted to men who know how to be alone, to men who don't need, to men who don't chase, to men who don't give in, to men who don't get upset by silence. A woman wants a man who can handle distance without losing his identity. Female coldness kills male attraction, but male independence fuels female attraction. When you stop writing to her, a woman begins to see two things: who you are and who she is next to you. If you stopped texting her and she didn't hear anything, she wasn't interested. If you stopped texting her and she warmed up, she started to interest you. If you stopped texting her and she got confused, she started to invest emotionally. If you stopped texting her and she withdrew completely, she wasn't ready. If you stopped texting her and she came back, it's because you've ignited something in her that few men do: the desire to pursue. Men don't understand that a woman never chases a man who's always there. She chases the man who remains a man even when she doesn't see him. She chases the man whose value is independent of his presence. She chases the man who doesn't live through his phone. She chases the man who knows how to be happy even without her, not because she doesn't care, but because he doesn't need to be completed. And this quality, completeness, is what every woman perceives as irresistible. When you stop texting her, she doesn't think you've disappeared. She thinks you're choosing. She thinks you're living. She thinks you have priorities. She thinks you have a mission. She thinks you're not waiting for her attention to feel valid. And this disarms her, confuses her, attracts her, because she's not used to men like that. She's used to men who react, to men who chase, to men who ask, to men who need answers, to men who fall into silence, but not to men who live. And when a woman meets a man who lives, she can't ignore him. When you stop writing to her, the first thing that stirs inside her isn't anger. It's not pride. It's not indifference. It's a question that arrives silently, without noise, but that passes through her chest like a vibration. Why has his rhythm changed? Women live by rhythm, by coherence, by continuity, not because they're fragile, but because they perceive the world through nuances. And when a man who previously wrote consistently suddenly slows down, a woman notices it immediately. It's like a change in climate, like a different wind, like a new smell in the air. And she doesn't ignore it. She senses it. The first reaction is never external. It's internal. A woman listens to what's happening before reacting. And when you stop texting her, she doesn't immediately rush to the conclusion that you're no longer interested in me. No. The woman first delves inside herself. She wonders if she said something strange, if her last message could have been misinterpreted, if she responded too coldly, if she put too much distance, if she showed too much availability, or too little. An internal microscope begins that leads her to reread the conversation, not once, but twice, 3 times, 10 times. Men have no idea how much a woman analyzes details. The pauses, the words, the dots, the emotional accents. A woman doesn't just look at what you say, but how you say it. She doesn't just look at what you write, but what you convey without knowing it. And when you stop texting her, she mentally returns to all the previous communication. She observes it, rereads it, deciphers it. And that process isn't superficial. It's profound. It's invisible. It's silent. But it always happens. Then the second thing happens, the most important. She feels like you're no longer there. And this never leaves her indifferent. Even when she pretends not to care. Even when she seems focused on something else. Even when she doesn't want to admit it. A woman feels emptiness like a reversed magnetic field. And faced with that emptiness, something inside her begins to stir. It's not a rush, it's not panic, it's tension. A slight ego tug. A microscopic why, because that's what the female mind does when a man stops writing. She doesn't think, I'm losing something. She thinks, what's happening inside him. It's a huge difference, because when you're always present, she observes you. When you disappear, she observes herself. And when a woman observes herself, she inevitably realizes that something matters to her. Because if she didn't care, she wouldn't ask questions. She wouldn't reread the conversations. She wouldn't notice the emptiness. But if she notices all this, then the silence is already a message, and a powerful message. Then comes another stage, even deeper. She begins to evaluate your energy, not your behavior, not your message, not your words, your energy. Because a woman feels what a man feels before he even knows it. If you stop writing to her because you're offended, she senses it. If you stop texting her because you're insecure, she senses it. If you stop texting her because you want to manipulate her, she senses it. But if you stop texting her because you have a life, because you have a direction, because you're not glued to your phone, because you're stable, then she senses something completely different. She senses value. A man who knows how to withdraw his energy without losing his focus communicates something that few men can. I don't live on what I receive. I live on what I am. It's a phrase no man would say openly, but a woman senses it. She senses it in the calm of your absence, in the non-aggressive silence, in the non-vindictive absence, in the non-manipulative void. A woman has an emotional radar, and that radar doesn't fail. She understands when your silence is born of fear and when it is born of presence. And when it is born of presence, then her perception of you changes radically. Many men believe that stopping texting is a technique, but it's not. It doesn't have to be a move. It doesn't have to be a trick. If it becomes a trick, it loses its power. A woman senses when you're using her as an exercise to influence her. She senses when you want to push her to pursue you. She senses when you're looking for a reaction. But she also senses, and above all, when you don't need a reaction. When you're simply living. When your silence isn't a weapon, but a natural rhythm. And this is where something men don't expect happens. When you stop texting her without agitation, without manipulation, without expectation, she doesn't think you've distanced yourself. She thinks you're a man who doesn't get lost when a woman doesn't text him. And this, inside her, generates a feeling that very few men can generate. Respect. Yes, respect. A woman may be attracted to your appearance, your voice, your character, but respect, true respect, arises only when she sees that you're not controlled by her availability. And when there's respect, there's profound attraction. Because respect means she sees something bigger in you. Something that goes beyond contact, beyond the message, beyond the conversation. Respect means she perceives your internal structure, your emotional backbone, your calm, your value. That's when the dynamic changes completely, because when she feels you're not dependent on her answers, her body reacts. Not her mind, her body. It's instinct. It's a polarity. It's a modern dynamic born from ancient roots. Because a woman, faced with a man who doesn't lose himself, can't help but feel interested. It's involuntary. It's natural. It's written in the way polarities work. And so, when you stop texting her like a stable man, she doesn't think you've lost her. She thinks you might be hard to reach. She doesn't think you're busy with someone else. She thinks you have something going on in your life. She doesn't think you've forgotten. She thinks you have an inner world, and women love men who have a world. Men who don't live only for attention. Men who don't need constant presence to feel alive. It's at this moment that distance becomes allure. It's at this moment that silence becomes magnetism. It's at this moment that your absence becomes more attractive than your constant presence. Because a woman doesn't bond with the man who's always there. She bonds with the man who isn't afraid of not being there. There's a third level, deeper and much less visible, that activates in a woman when you stop texting her. It's no longer about what you did, what she did, or what happened between you. It's about what she feels inside when your presence is suddenly replaced by a void. It's a level that doesn't belong to logic, but to the body, to emotional memory, to the primal part that guides her reactions, even when she doesn't want to. And it's precisely in this invisible space that the truth that few men see plays out. Because when you stop texting her, she doesn't just think about you. She thinks about what you mean to her. She thinks about the feeling she had when you spoke. She thinks about how she felt emotionally when your tone, your rhythm, your presence were there. And that silent comparison between the presence of before and the absence of now brings to light a thought that no woman expresses openly, but that all women experience. Do I miss what I felt when he was present? Not, I miss him. Do I miss what I felt when he was present? This is the real point. Because a woman doesn't bond with the man himself. She bonds with the way that man makes her feel. She doesn't bond with the conversation itself. She bonds with the emotions that conversation ignited in her. And if you are capable, even just partially, of making her feel lightness, curiosity, peace, attraction, security, sweetness, intensity, or mystery, then when you stop writing to her, those emotions don't go away. They stay there. They repeat themselves. And suddenly she realizes that there was something in you that is now missing. It is in that moment that an invisible man becomes present, even in absence. It is there that what you were begins to live inside her, not through words, through sensations. And this is what men rarely understand. When you stop texting her, a woman doesn't evaluate your gesture. She evaluates the emotional memory of your presence. She evaluates what her body felt. She evaluates what her mind imagined. She evaluates the version of herself that emerged when she spoke to you, and above all, she evaluates one thing: how your presence or absence affects her internal balance. Men who are too available have little influence. Men who are too needy have a negative influence. But centered men have a profound influence. And when a centered man distances himself, his absence doesn't vanish. It resonates. It resonates in the way she looks at herself in the mirror. It resonates in the calm she loses or the restlessness that emerges. It resonates in the question she tries to ignore. It resonates in that small sensation of internal movement she can't explain. Your absence becomes an energetic field. And this is precisely where the most powerful thought a woman has when you stop texting her arises. A man who doesn't need to chase me. Why? She doesn't say it. She doesn't admit it. She doesn't admit it to anyone. But deep down, a woman always asks herself this question. Always. Because a man who doesn't chase, a man who doesn't get agitated, a man who doesn't get upset when she doesn't respond as before, is a man who suggests something fundamental: self-sufficiency. And male self-sufficiency is like a perfume a woman recognizes with her eyes closed. It's an ancestral call, a sign of value, a sign of natural selection, a signal that says, I live well even without you. If I choose you, it's a choice, not a need. This sentence is never said out loud, but a woman hears it. And the difference between choice and need for a woman is everything. A man who chooses is attractive. A man who needs is a burden. Independence isn't distance. It's value. Because when you stop writing to her like an independent man, you don't create anxiety. You create demand. The difference is enormous. Anxiety scares, demand attracts, and almost always, after that question comes another, even brighter sensation: curiosity. The female brain is attracted to what it can't control. It's attracted to mystery. It's attracted to what escapes its emotional radar. It's attracted to the man who doesn't react the way everyone else reacts. It's attracted to the man who doesn't succumb to neediness. The man who stops texting her not out of offense, but because he's in a direction create an aura she can't ignore. Controlled unpredictability. Not chaotic unpredictability, which scares her, but calm unpredictability, which intrigues her. A woman doesn't want a man who reacts. She wants a man who responds. And responding in this case means choosing when to be there, not always being there. Then there's yet another level, even more psychological. When you stop texting her, she realizes something she rarely admits. If she's upset, even just a little, it means she's already invested something. It doesn't matter how much. A thought, an energy, a curiosity, an imagination, an emotion that was being born. And when a man creates an internal investment and then withdraws, a woman doesn't forget it, because a woman remembers everything she feels. This is where the perception changes completely, because she no longer thinks, "He doesn't text me." She thinks, "Why does it bother me that he doesn't text me?" And it's this awareness that brings her closer, not your silence, her reaction to your silence. It's a mechanism you can't force. You can't manipulate, you can't improvise, you can only embody, because it only works if your silence comes from a man who has a world, not from a man who pretends to have one. A woman always distinguishes a man who truly lives from one who puts on an act. It's an instinctive sensitivity, a truth much older than modern relationships. She's not looking for a perfect man. She's looking for a man who doesn't get lost. And when you stop texting her like a man who doesn't get lost, she never thinks you've disappeared. She thinks you might be harder to reach. And that feeling, that micro burst of uncertainty, that slight emotional inclination toward you, is exactly the point where attraction ignites. Not where you're present, but where you're missing in the right way. There's a particular, almost imperceptible moment that happens inside a woman when you stop texting her. A moment that you don't see, that no one sees, but which decides much of the future dynamic. It's the moment she stops asking herself, "Why doesn't he write to me?" and starts asking herself, "What does this mean to me?" It's a tiny, yet powerful, psychological transition. Because it's in that moment that your absence stops being a fact and becomes a meaning. And when something acquires meaning in a woman's mind, it acquires power. Most men believe that women react to behavior, but women react to symbols. Every gesture, every silence, every presence, every distance becomes a symbol. An invisible message that she interprets according to her emotional world, her sensitivity, her experience, her wounds, her desires. It's not a conscious process. It's not something she decides. She doesn't sit down and analyze. It happens inside, like a reflex. When you stop writing to her, she doesn't experience emptiness. She experiences what that emptiness represents. If she felt you were insecure, your absence tells her that perhaps you've lost interest, and that hurts her. If she perceived you as too available, your absence tells her that perhaps you found your independence, and this intrigues her. If she perceived you as stable, your absence tells her that you're a busy, focused, and active man, and this attracts her. If she perceived you as a dependent man, your absence confuses her because she didn't expect you to be capable of withdrawing. Every male profile produces a different symbol in her mind. This is why the same gesture can mean 1,000 different things. But there's one constant. A woman, faced with your silence, immediately senses whether you're a man who's lost control or a man who's controlling himself. If you withdraw because you're hurt, she senses it. If you withdraw to manipulate, she senses it. If you withdraw out of fear, she senses it. If you withdraw because you have a life calling you, she senses it. Women aren't wrong about this. The female body recognizes emotional truth faster than the male mind. And one thing is certain, the perception of your energy creates the direction of her thoughts. A stable man creates attracted thoughts. An unstable man creates defensive thoughts. A man who is distant out of fear creates confused thoughts. A man who is distant by choice creates intense thoughts. Because this is what you must understand. When you stop texting her, she doesn't think about what you're doing. She thinks about who you are. And this is the difference that defines everything. A woman doesn't fall in love with your gestures. She falls in love with your perceived identity. She falls in love with what your behavior tells her about you. And when you stop texting her, she interprets that void to understand your identity. It's an ancient instinct. It's a protective system. It's the way the female mind chooses. And almost always, in that void, one of the most powerful questions a woman can ask emerges. Is this man confident? Why does she think this? Because confidence is the key to everything. Male confidence is not arrogance. It's not detachment. It's not coldness. It's stability. It's calm. It's direction. It's the ability to not be defined by what a woman does or doesn't do. And when you disappear, if your silence is pure, if it comes from stability, if it is not an impulsive gesture but a serene choice, then your confidence lights up before her eyes. A man who stops writing to her without losing his identity communicates a truth that almost no woman admits openly, but all feel deeply. I don't revolve around you. Not said with disdain, not said coldly, said calmly. This invisible phrase creates a huge effect, because a woman doesn't want to be the axis of your life. She wants to be part of your life. There's a world of difference. The man who makes a woman his center loses his strength. The man who has a center of his own becomes irresistible. And when you stop writing to her while remaining whole, that center shows. She feels it. She feels that you're not begging for answers, that you're not checking your phone, that you're not seeking validation, that you're not fretting. She feels that you're breathing, that you're living, that you're walking. And when a man walks, a woman follows. Not because he's weak, but because it's in female nature to be drawn to direction. In that silence, she also begins to wonder if you're valuing your presence. It's a question many women never ask, but all of them feel inside. Was he valuing me too much or the right amount? Because a man who always writes, who replies immediately, who is always available, communicates one thing: dependence. And dependence for a woman is always a warning bell. When you stop writing to her, however, her mind clicks. A man who knows how to withdraw is a man who knows how to give. A man who knows how to create space is a man who knows how to create value. A man who isn't afraid of emptiness is a man who can contain someone else. The paradox is that women approach men who know how to distance themselves, but only when that distance isn't a game. It's not revenge. It's not a whim. It's not manipulation. It's a natural consequence of your life. It's a rhythm. It's a movement. It's a direction. And then something subtle but powerful happens. She starts to wonder if you're thinking about something else. Not another woman. Something else. The difference is enormous. If she thinks you've disappeared because you're chasing someone, she'll lose interest. But if she thinks you've disappeared because you have a life, she'll get closer. Women don't fear romantic competition. They fear men without direction. And when you stop texting her, if you do it as a man with direction, she doesn't think you're leaving. She thinks you're moving on. And that's the most attractive thing she can feel inside herself. Because a man who moves on is a man a woman wants to reach. There's something men don't understand until they actually see how a woman reacts when they stop texting her. Her silence is never simply silence. It's a psychological zone. She enters, moves, analyzes, feels, reconstructs. And it's in that space that thoughts much deeper than those you imagine arise. Because when a woman no longer receives your energy, no longer receives your presence, no longer receives that small but constant confirmation of your attention, her mind opens like a room that until a moment before was illuminated, and now is crossed by a shadow that changes everything. And in that inner darkness, she begins to ask herself something that no man truly wants to hear, but that every woman thinks. Who is this man without me? Not, who is this man with me? Not, who is this man when we talk? Not, who is this man when I text him? No. The real question is, who are you when I'm not looking at you? It's a profound ancestral question, because a woman never falls in love with the man she sees. She falls in love with the man she imagines, the man she perceives, the man she can intuit, the man she doesn't fully understand. And that part she doesn't understand is what attracts her, because attraction is born from mystery, not from total transparency. It is born from perception, not from explanation. And mystery isn't a game. It's a consequence of your independence. When you stop writing to her, if you're a man with a full life, she immediately senses a mystery, because she instinctively understands that you're moving forward with your day, with your commitments, with your goals, with your thoughts. She understands that you're in your movement, and that movement attracts her, because a woman is biologically attracted to male movement, not the physical one, but the internal one, to what a man pursues, to what a man builds, to what a man protects, to what a man dreams. And when you stop writing to her, she inevitably wonders, what is she chasing? It's in that exact and invisible moment that your absence becomes magnetism. Men fear space. Women feel it. Men fear silence. Women interpret it. Men fear distance. Women read it. Distance doesn't scare a woman when the man who creates it is a full man. It's only scary when the man who creates it is an empty man. Because if you stop texting her empty, your silence reeks of insecurity. But if you stop texting her full, your silence smells of value. A woman perceives this difference so immediately that it almost surprises her. Because a woman lives on energy, not logical analysis. She lives on sensations. And when you stop texting her, she feels something that very few men are capable of generating. The feeling that you are not emotionally dependent on her. For a woman, this feeling is like an electric shock. Because most men, when they are interested, become predictable. They write too much. They write quickly. They write to ask for confirmation. They write to correct silences. They write to erase tension. They write to not feel emptiness. And when a man uses messages to fill his anxiety, a woman feels the weight of that anxiety more than the words themselves. But when a man stops texting her and doesn't get agitated, then something happens. Her feminine body relaxes. Her mind enters a place she rarely visits. And a question arises that has the power to change everything. Why doesn't this man need me? This isn't a trivial question. It's the question that ignites true attraction. Because a woman doesn't want to be needed. She wants to be chosen. And in your silence, she senses the choice. Not your distance, your choice. The choice to live your life. The choice not to chase. The choice not to depend on. The choice not to be defined by his rhythm. And as a woman experiences this perception, a very subtle but very real emotional movement also begins. A movement that brings with it another question. Why can he be okay without me? This question doesn't arise from doubt. It arises from admiration. Men believe that female admiration comes from physical strength, achievements, intelligence, beauty. No. True female admiration comes from one thing: self-control. A man who can stay without writing, not because he holds back, but because he's naturally busy living, communicates self-control. And a man who communicates self-control is perceived as an emotional leader. And when a woman perceives an emotional leader, something inside her activates. It's not fear. It's not anxiety. It's not pain. It's desire. A desire to understand more. A desire to get closer. A desire to feel chosen. A desire to enter your world. And this is where the dynamic changes completely. Because the absence of a fragile man is debilitating. But the absence of a strong man ignites. At that point, she no longer sees your silence as a lack. She sees it as a signal that you have a path, a signal that you're not waiting, a signal that you're not begging for attention, a signal that you have priorities, a signal that your life is full enough to support you without constantly needing her. And a woman, when she feels all this, never thinks, then I'll let him go. She thinks, then I want to reach out to him. Because the man who doesn't seek is the man a woman wants to pursue. Not because he's superior, but because she perceives that he is complete. And male completeness is the most attractive thing a woman can perceive. When you stop writing to her in the right way, you lose nothing. You gain space inside her. There's a precise, almost invisible point where your absence stops being just a gesture and becomes a terrain on which she begins to walk. It's a point you don't notice, because it doesn't happen on the outside. It happens inside her. It's not when you stop texting her. It's not when she sees the chat empty. It's not when she notices you're no longer present like before. It happens much later, in a silent moment, when her mind, alone, without stimulation, without messages, without notifications, returns to you. Without you doing anything. It's the beginning of your true power. Not when you write, when you return to her thoughts without meaning to. This is what men don't understand. A woman doesn't bond based on how long you're there. She bonds based on how much your presence remains inside her when you're not. That's where everything comes into play. That's where real attraction is formed. That's where spontaneous desire is born. That's where a woman understands if you're truly worth it. Because you can write 1,000 messages, you can be sweet, present, affectionate, brilliant, interesting. But if when you disappear for a day she feels nothing, you haven't left a trace. You've just taken up space. And a woman doesn't bond with what takes up space. She bonds with what leaves a mark. Your absence is proof of the mark you've left. Always. Because when you stop writing to her, something happens that no man sees. She enters into a dialogue with your energy. Even if you don't want it, even if you're not interested, even if you don't realize it. It's an invisible dialogue between what you were once present and what you are now, distant. And it's in that dialogue that she understands your value. First comes doubt, then comes curiosity, then comes perception, then comes the most powerful question of all. Why do I feel his absence? This question is what separates the men who remain in a woman's mind from the men who are forgotten. If she feels nothing, you are just entertainment. If she feels something, you are a man who vibrates in her psychology. A woman doesn't fall in love with a man who entertained her. She falls in love with a man who moves her. And your absence, if you're a centered man, moves her. It forces her to look within. It makes her ask herself why she's thinking of you. It makes her compare what she felt when she wrote to you with what she feels now. It makes her wonder if you're really that different from everyone else. This is where the magic happens. When you stop texting her and don't break down, don't beg, don't chase, don't act nervous. She doesn't just see your strength. She sees her reaction to your strength. And in that reaction, she discovers how much she really likes you. Men always think they're the ones who have to figure out how much a woman likes them. She's the one who figures it out first. And she often figures it out when you're not there. A woman can ignore a man who talks, but she can't ignore a man who feels. Because when you stop texting her, if there's even the slightest attraction, she starts observing her own body. That small internal shift, that slight tension, that curiosity that never goes away, that urge to check her phone, that microscopic "why isn't she answering?" That emotional movement that starts from the wrists, rises along the chest, and reaches the mind. This is how a woman feels your presence in your absence. Not because you're playing hard to get, not because you're playing hard to get, but why aren't you giving in? It's your stability that generates movement within her, not your silence. Silence is a door. Your energy is what she finds when she opens it. And if behind that door she finds anxiety, manipulation, anger, or emptiness, she closes herself even more. But if she finds calm, direction, serenity, and a man who lives, then she approaches. Not immediately, not openly, but slowly, deeply, invisibly. Because when a woman senses that a man isn't trying to attract her, her natural polarity activates. She's the one who starts to approach. This is precisely the male paradox that very few understand. The more you pursue a woman, the more you push her away. The more you center yourself, the more she comes back. It's not superficial psychology, it's emotional biology. Women are attracted to what they can't control, but at the same time makes them feel safe. A man who doesn't react is uncontrollable. A man who doesn't disappear is secure. And when you stop texting her and remain this type of man, she feels both dimensions. The unpredictability that ignites desire, the stability that ignites respect. When these two things come together, a woman doesn't withdraw. She opens up. She doesn't turn cold. She becomes receptive. She doesn't run away. She approaches. And it's precisely at this point that many women begin to do something no man really notices. They imagine what they would say if you returned. They imagine how they would respond. They imagine how they would feel if a message arrived. This is the point where you've already won. Not because you'll return, but because she's already begun to prepare a space for you inside herself. The true male conquest isn't holding her when you speak. It's staying inside her when you're silent. Average men conquer with presence. Rare men conquer with calm. And when you stop texting her like a rare man, your absence becomes an invitation. An implicit, subtle, powerful invitation. An invitation to look at yourself from another perspective. No longer as a man seeking, but as a man who attracts. And men who attract never do so by chance. They do it because their life is bigger than conversation. And a woman, when she hears it, doesn't think, "He doesn't want me." She thinks, "I have to go see him." There are things a woman thinks when you stop texting her that she will never confess, not to her friends, not to herself, not even to you. These are thoughts that don't belong to the surface. They belong to a more intimate, more ancient, more hidden level. They are thoughts that arise not from logic, but from instinct. The modern woman speaks as if she were independent, autonomous, disinterested. And many are. But instinct doesn't lie. And when a man she perceives as interesting, attractive, different, or simply potentially worthy stops texting her, something no woman can control is activated. A man who doesn't seek ignites desire. A man who doesn't beg ignites respect. A man who doesn't react ignites curiosity. And curiosity is the seed from which everything that can become profound grows. In that void you create, a void that isn't aggressive but natural, she begins to see you from angles she hadn't considered before. And it's from those angles that a woman begins to ask herself something much bigger than simply, "Why doesn't he text me?" She asks herself, "What kind of man is he who doesn't contact me?" Not, "Why doesn't he contact me?" Not, "What have I done?" Not, "He has someone else." She wants to understand the man, his psychology, his strength, his independence, his direction. And this is the part that most men misunderstand. When you stop texting her, she doesn't look at your actions. She looks at your character. Because in the female mind, behavior is just a clue, but character is the truth. And your truth emerges only when you disappear, only when you don't expose yourself, only when you don't seek validation, only when you don't ask for attention. A man who constantly searches disappears into the crowd. A man who knows how to remain silent emerges in his identity, and a woman feels this identity like a vibration under her skin. When you stop writing to her, she wonders if you're a man who needs or a man who has choices. And there's no attraction stronger than a man who acts out of choice, not necessity. Because a man who has choices doesn't settle. He doesn't cling. He doesn't chase. He doesn't depend. A man who has choices chooses, and a woman wants to be chosen, not tolerated. The fact that you don't write makes her wonder if you're the man who lets himself be carried away by the dynamic or the man who steers his own course. If you're the man who waits for approval or the man who lives his own life. If you're the man who breaks at the first silence or the man who remains whole even in absence. In that moment, without wanting it, without saying it, without showing you anything, she begins to evaluate you as a potential emotional partner, not as entertainment, not as a message dot, not as a conversation, as a man. And the more she observes, the more she understands that the fact that you don't write says much more than any message you could send her. She says she doesn't control you. She says she doesn't possess you. She says you're not a man who bends. She says you have a world, and that world won't collapse if she's not constantly inside. This feeling confuses her, because most men can't stand still in the face of female distance. They approach immediately. They ask, they press, they justify themselves. They fill. You don't, you stay. And in staying, you show your strength. Then comes a second phase, more emotional, more subtle. The woman begins to ask herself something she will never admit. Why isn't he seeking my attention? Why doesn't he need my answer? And from this question comes the sensation that changes everything. A slight inclination, a call, a pull, a curiosity that slowly turns into attraction, because the female brain works in a way that is both simple and complex at the same time. What it can't control, it longs to understand. And what she desires to understand, she desires to approach. In other words, a woman approaches you when you are no longer completely accessible. Not because you are ignoring her, but because you are living. And when a woman senses that a man is living, without weighing her down, without expecting anything, without demands, without need, without dependence, she feels something melt inside her. Respect. And respect is the root of female attraction. A woman can desire a man without respecting him, but she cannot bind herself to a man she doesn't respect. Your silence, if born of strength, becomes respect. Your silence, if born of calm, becomes charm. Your silence, if born of direction, becomes attraction. And then the part happens that men don't imagine. She begins to wonder if your life is more interesting than hers, not in a toxic comparison, but in a profoundly human way. She begins to wonder what you're doing, what you're building, what you're experiencing, who you're becoming, who you're talking to, and above all, why you're not looking for her. And the more she asks these questions, the more she returns to you. The more she returns to those moments when you were there. The more she returns to the sensations she felt. The more she returns to the details. The more she returns to the emotions. The more she returns to your energy. And your energy always wins over your presence. Always. Because a woman doesn't want a man who's always there. She wants a man who stays inside when he's not, and that place inside her that you're now occupying without even knowing it. You can't get it by writing more. You get it by becoming more. When you stop writing to her and remain a man, not fragile, not reactive, not hurt, not manipulative, but a man, she doesn't think, he's not interested in me. She thinks, who is this man, and why am I thinking about him? And this is the beginning of her return. There's a moment in a woman's mind when you definitively stop being the guy I was talking to and start becoming the man who's moving me inside. It's a moment that almost never coincides with what you do when you're present. Instead, it happens when you're not there, when your presence becomes absence, when the noise of conversation fades and only what you truly are remains. Because a woman doesn't attach herself to what she sees. She attaches herself to what she perceives when she no longer sees you, when you stop texting her, and you don't do it out of anger, pride, or manipulation, but out of naturalness, life, direction. An emotional phenomenon occurs that few men know. She enters your absence like entering a room that had never been lit before, and that room is you. The you without words, the you without attempts, the you without demonstrations. That's where she truly sees you, and that's where she begins to think something she'll never admit out loud. Maybe he was more important than I thought. It's not a clear statement. It's not immediate. It's an internal whisper, and discomfort she can't explain. A feeling that grows slowly, because a woman understands a man's value not when he speaks, but when he is silent. Male silence is a language, and a very powerful one. Because it says nothing, but it communicates everything. It communicates balance. It communicates direction. It communicates independence. It communicates that you're not afraid of emptiness. And a man who isn't afraid of emptiness automatically becomes attractive. Many men text because they're afraid that silence will ruin everything. But it's precisely that silence, if it comes from stability, that builds what they seek: the perception of value. A woman perceives a man's value in the moments when he's not looking for her, because there she sees his autonomy. There she sees his calm. There she sees his solidity. There she sees whether his interest is genuine or unstable. And as she observes this space, something even more important happens. She begins to compare what she felt when you were there with what she feels now that you're not. Men believe that women want constant attention. This is false. Women want constant value, and value isn't perceived when you're present. It's perceived when you're missing. When you were there, she perceived your rhythm. Now that you're not there, she perceives the emptiness of that rhythm, and that emptiness is never neutral. If you were just an ordinary man, she feels nothing. If you were a man who conveyed something, she feels it. A woman can't control what she feels in a vacuum, and the vacuum is the space where truth emerges. Then something else happens, even deeper. She begins to wonder, is he living? Is he okay? Does he have his priorities straight? Is his life in order? Does he have more important things than me right now? These questions don't scare her. They attract her, because a woman doesn't want a man who revolves around her. She wants a man who revolves around his own direction. When a man has a direction, a woman naturally follows him, not because she's weak, but because the feminine nature seeks stability, seeks security, seeks a man who knows who he is. And a man who knows who he is also knows when to shut up. Many men, when they don't write, are silent on the outside but chaotic on the inside. She feels it. Other times, men feign disinterest. She feels it. Other times, men hold back for strategy. She senses it. But the man who truly lives, who has a real world, who doesn't write because he's doing something concrete, who doesn't write because he's immersed in his routine, his mission, his focus, that silence, she feels differently. She feels it clean. She feels it natural. She feels it heavy. Heavy not in the negative sense. Heavy in the sense that it weighs. In the sense that it leaves an imprint. In the sense that it can't be ignored. And here, a powerful psychological reversal occurs. As long as you were the one writing to her, she was considering how to respond. Now that you're not writing, she's considering the desire to respond if you were to return. This is the exact moment when the dynamic reverses. You're no longer in her orbit. She's in yours. Because a woman, when she begins to imagine how she'd behave if you were to return, is actually already turning back to you. She's already investing. She's already granting emotional space. She's already recognizing your value. And the more you stay centered, the more she moves. The more you remain a man, the more she becomes a woman. The more you stay in your direction, the more she wants to be part of that direction. This is not a game. It's not technique. It's not manipulation. It's nature. Because a woman doesn't want a man who puts her at the center of his life. She wants a man who has a center. And your silence, if it comes from your center, attracts her more than any word. Because it communicates that you are not lost. You are not empty. You are not lost. You are not needy. It communicates that you are living. It communicates that you are growing. It communicates that you are moving forward. It communicates that you are walking on a path that waits for no one. This is where she thinks the thing no woman wants to admit. If I don't get there, someone else might. And it's not jealousy. It's the perception of your value. Men seek pursuit. Women chase the perception of value. And when you stop writing to her without losing yourself, they feel that value. Strong, clear, inevitable. It's at that moment that a woman no longer thinks about your silence. She thinks about you. And this, exactly this, is where her desire begins. There's a point, almost imperceptible, where your absence stops being simply a fact and becomes a force. Not an aggressive force, not a force of domination, not a force of control. It's a magnetic force, silent, light, but unstoppable. A woman never admits it, but when an interesting man stops writing to her, her internal world slowly begins to shift toward him. It doesn't happen suddenly. It doesn't happen suddenly. It's a discrete movement, like the sea advancing on the sand without you noticing, slow but steady. And as this movement happens, a sentence begins to form inside her, almost wordlessly, almost unconsciously. I'm starting to think about him too much. That sentence is the beginning of everything. Because a woman doesn't think too much about a man who isn't worthy. She doesn't think too much about a man who doesn't touch her emotionally. Don't think too much about a man who's like everyone else. If a thought comes to mind, there's a reason. And that reason is you. Not what you do, but for what you don't do. Men believe their actions win her over. But often it's their ability to not act that reveals their strength. A woman gazes into the void and, in the void, sees you. She observes you in your absence as she couldn't previously observe you in your presence. And as this happens, a psychological phase begins that very few men know, but that all women experience. The phase of comparison between yourself and others. Not the superficial comparison, the kind you find on social media or among friends, but the profound comparison. The one that happens inside, without witnesses, without words, without filters. When you stop writing to her, she unconsciously begins to compare you with all the men she's ever known. And the question that drives this comparison is never, why doesn't she write to me? It's much deeper, much more intimate, much more revealing. The question is, why does her absence matter and that of others doesn't? And it's precisely here that a woman understands the difference between an ordinary man and a rare man. Ordinary men disappear and make no noise. Rare men disappear and leave an echo. And she hears that echo even if she doesn't want to hear it. She hears it while she's working, while she's driving, while she's with friends, while she's scrolling on her phone, while she's thinking about something else. It's a subtle but persistent echo. A thought that returns on its own. A curiosity that never fades. And the more she tries to ignore it, the more that curiosity grows. Because a woman can't shake what her body has already begun to perceive as masculine value. And here, something even more powerful happens. She begins to wonder if your absence is a form of quality. Women never admit it, but their respect for a man grows every time he doesn't let himself be governed by the emotions of the moment. Every time he doesn't text out of need. Every time he doesn't chase out of fear. Every time he doesn't compensate out of insecurity. Respect always comes from one thing: your ability to remain a man even when she changes pace. And when you stop texting her, she observes how much you remain yourself. Many men become cold. She feels it. Many men stiffen. She feels it. Many men get offended. She feels it. Many men wait for a reaction. She feels it. And that feels it is devastating to attraction, because it makes one thing clear: you are not the one driving your emotions. But when you stop texting her and remain warm inside, free inside, stable inside, she feels something else. She feels that you have not suffered anything. She feels that you have not lost anything. She feels that you are not fighting an emotion. She feels that you are not controlling yourself. She feels that you are truly like this. A man who can stand the distance without collapsing. A man who can bear the silence without bending. A man who doesn't need her to feel valid. And this perception hits her like a slow but powerful wave. Because a woman is attracted to a man who sees himself more clearly than she sees him, she is attracted to a man who doesn't lose himself even if she distances herself. She is attracted to a man who doesn't react as expected. Because when you don't react as expected, she starts to wonder, is it possible that he's worth more than I thought? And this is the spark of deep attraction. The one that doesn't come from romanticism. The one that doesn't come from need. The one that doesn't come from attention. The one that comes from energy. The energy you transmit when you do nothing. The energy you transmit when you stay. The energy you transmit when your calm is stronger than his distance. In that moment, she no longer thinks about your silence. She thinks about the meaning of your silence. And the meaning she perceives is simple and irresistible. This man has a life that doesn't revolve around me. It's not cruelty. It's strength. It's independence. It's integrity. It's emotional masculinity. And this is where the most important phase occurs. She begins to imagine you, but not like before, not in a superficial way, not in a mechanical way. She imagines you going about your day. She imagines you doing what you love. She imagines you with other people. She imagines you focused. She imagines you smiling. She imagines you busy. She imagines you present elsewhere, but truly present. And as she imagines you, she begins to long to be part of that world, not because you miss it, but because you are full. A woman isn't attracted to the man who always seeks her out. She's attracted to the man she needs to reach. And when you stop writing to her in the right way, she never thinks, he's not interested in me. She thinks, maybe I underestimated him. Maybe I didn't really understand him. Maybe he's worth more than he seems. Maybe I have to do my part. And this is the exact point where a woman stops wondering why you don't write, and starts wondering when she'll be able to hear from you again. It's not you who's coming back to her. It's she who's coming back to you. There's a final point, an invisible but decisive point, where what she thinks when you stop writing to her is no longer about you, but about herself in relation to you. It's a point where your absence stops being just an event and becomes a reflection. The reflection of what she feels, the reflection of what she desires, the reflection of what she fears, the reflection of what she might lose. And it's precisely in this reflection that the most uncomfortable truth arises. the one no woman will ever admit. When a man she admired, respected, or began to appreciate stops writing to her, her first fear isn't that you're gone. Her first fear is that you might make it without her. That's the most powerful fear. Not the loss, not the distance, not the silence, but the thought that you can flourish anyway, that you can grow anyway, that you can shine anyway, that you can move forward in your life without needing her as fuel. Because a woman is struck not by a man who chases her, but by a man who knows how to live without her holding his hand. And when you stop writing to her, she finds herself faced with the starkest image of your value. You, alone, moving forward. It's then that she realizes something that unsettles her. You're not emotionally dependent. You're not psychologically attached. You're not waiting. You're not begging. You're not measuring your worth by how she responds to you. You're living. You're choosing. You're walking. And this independence, this autonomy, this calm, this solidity, impresses her more than any sweet text or romantic gesture. Because no woman wants a man who needs her. She wants a man who can choose her. The difference is enormous. And as this awareness grows within her, something surprising happens. She begins to think no longer about what you do, but about what she might lose. Women rarely admit that a man can be a loss. But when a man has internal value, when he has direction, when he exudes calm, when he doesn't get agitated, when he doesn't fade in the face of silence, then yes, he can be a loss. And she feels it. She feels it in her ribs. She feels it in her breathing. She feels it in the way she thinks about her phone and then puts it down. She feels it when she wants to ignore you but can't. She feels it when she realizes he's waiting for you even though he shouldn't be. And it's at this precise and powerful point that a woman begins to wonder, what if he's the one I've been looking for? This question never arises when there's too much closeness. Constant closeness suffocates perception. It breaks the mystery. It extinguishes desire. Distance, on the other hand, ignites. It ignites curiosity. It ignites perception. It ignites emotional memory. It ignites the desire to return. And while she experiences this internal tension, while she feels this mix of admiration and uncertainty growing, a very important psychological process also begins. She begins to reevaluate your flaws. Yes, your flaws. When a man is too available, every flaw weighs more heavily. A slow response becomes an insult. A misinterpreted joke becomes a problem. A small inconsistency becomes an obstacle. But when a man shows himself to be strong in the distance, his flaws change shape. They are no longer signs of weakness. They become signs of authenticity. They become humanity. They become part of his identity, not obstacles to connection. She no longer thinks, he was wrong. She thinks, he's not perfect, but he's real. And reality, for a woman who perceives a man as powerful, is irresistible. Then there's another, even deeper step. A woman not only reevaluates you, she reevaluates herself around you. When you stop texting her and remain centered, strong, and present in your life, she begins to ask herself, how did I behave when I was in contact with him? This question leads her to review the recent past with new eyes. Maybe she realizes she's been cold. Maybe she realizes she didn't give enough. Maybe she realizes she took your energy for granted. Maybe she realizes she believed you would stay even if she didn't invest. This is how her emotional reversal arises. Not because she's jealous, not because she's insecure, but because she's reevaluating you as a man. And this reevaluation increases desire. Female attraction is always an internal movement. It doesn't arise from what a man says. It comes from what a man allows a woman to feel inside herself. And when you stop writing to her in the right way, she senses your value, your calm, your direction, your strength, your emotional solidity, your ability to stay, your ability to live without. And that's when the most important thing in the whole dynamic happens. She begins to wonder if your life is better with or without her. Men wonder if women like them. Women wonder if they deserve a place in the life of a man of value. And when they feel they might not deserve it, they start chasing. Not because you're manipulating them, but because they're recognizing you, recognizing your energy, recognizing your presence, recognizing your stability, recognizing your difference. And that's when everything changes. In that moment, she no longer thinks, "Why doesn't she write to me?" She thinks, "I hope she comes back." And when a man gets to that point, it's not because he's played. It's because he's grown up. Because a man who doesn't need to run is exactly the man a woman dreams of reaching.